I, Lance Biggs, am not bad-looking, but I was justifiably suspicious when a woman who was a younger version of Elizabeth Hurley by the name of Alicia Spears started to take an interest in me. Based upon looks and brains alone, she should be with someone like Brad Pitt, George Clooney, or Tom Brady, not someone like me. It took me a while to figure out what was going on, but fortunately I did before things spiraled out of control. But I'm getting ahead of myself. By the time I met the Elizabeth Hurley look-alike, I was almost 30 and had been married for 4 years to J.C. Biggs, formerly Swanson. Although I had a trust fund, I was also working hard as an entrepreneur, running Biggs Alternatives, LLC, a company I started that employed about 30 people and produced socially responsible products. Because of my trust fund, JC and I had a prenuptial agreement with a morality sword cheating clause that carried heavy penalties if either of us broke it. My finances were pretty well protected by the prenup unless I violated that clause. JC is a very attractive woman, 28 years old at the time that Alicia started paying attention to me, although not in Alicia's class. But then again, I had never met anyone live before who was. JC also works, although only part-time, as a travel agent. She's a little more greedy than I thought that she was when we got married, but I enjoyed keeping her happy, so I didn't complain too much about her excessive spending or her values. She was never rude, great in bed, and fun to hang out with, so that was all that I really cared about. One of my major joys in life is playing competitive tennis. I played Division III non-scholarship tennis in college and am pretty good for a club player. I use tennis, weightlifting, and an elliptical if poor weather or jogging if decent weather to keep in shape, which is very important to me. JC doesn't play tennis, although she loves to socialize at the tennis club that we belong to. The club has a number of social events each month, a decent restaurant, and a nice swimming pool. JC never goes to the tennis court, however, even to watch me play in the tournaments that we seem to have every couple of months. I play in singles, doubles, and mixed doubles tournaments. My doubles partner is Jay Feely, a 50-something banker who played Division Iron scholarship tennis in college, and though when younger was much better than me, now is at about the same level that I am, and the second-ranked over 40 male player at the club. My usual mixed doubles partner is Misty Granger, a 38-year-old attorney who is typically the fourth-ranked under 40 women's singles player at the club. I'm the third-ranked under 40 men's singles player. Misty only handles transactional work as an attorney, no trials. She's a really special person, cute, friendly, and full of energy. She also has an amazing body, but since I was happily married, and she seemed to be as well, I never focused on that part of her. I met Alicia, the Elizabeth Hurley look-alike with a DD rack, a gorgeous face, flat abs, and thighs that defied description at the tennis club that I, JCJ, and Misty belonged to. Alicia was a recent addition to our club. I never was sure if she was a new member or what we call a tenured sponsor guest. Regardless of her exact status, most of the times that I was at the tennis club, she was there too. Alicia, who was 28 when I met her, is at almost the same level in tennis ability as Misty, although she does have one significant handicap. Her big chest sometimes gets in the way of her stroke. Nobody comments on it. I really don't know how it happened at the time, but for what sounded like a dumb reason, Misty didn't just bow out of teaming with me in a tournament, but in Alicia's presence suggested that I substitute her as my partner. It would have been embarrassing for everyone if I said, "No, Alicia is distracting because she is so hot, so if you can't do it, Misty, I'll get someone else." Therefore I went along, apparently outwardly warmly but inwardly upset. Because by then, Alicia had increased her attempts to seriously play up to me. Things got weirder when Misty teamed up with Roger Turner for the tournament. Nobody ever wanted to play doubles with 30-something Roger because he is the club jerk. I was as confused as a goat on AstroTurf. Alicia wanted to get in as much practice time as I would agree to. I don't know what Alicia did for a living, but she was essentially always available. She also constantly wanted to socialize afterwards, go to lunch or some such thing. I complained to JC about Alicia trying to monopolize my time at the club, and also talked to her about how perplexed I was about Misty teaming up with Roger. JC didn't seem to take me seriously. She just smiled and said, "I'm sure it's just because you're nice to everyone and not everyone at the club is nice to Alicia. Why, what problem do people have with her?" I earnestly inquired. "Well, just between us, a lot of women are jealous of her, and to other women she isn't as nice as she is to you," JC replied with a smile. "How do you know that?" I asked. "Because I'm tuned into all gossip at the club," she laughed. "Then do you know why Misty dropped me and then hooked up with Roger?" "That I have no clue about," JC smiled. I generally went along with the flow as far as Alicia was concerned. But when Alicia started calling me at work, I knew that something wasn't kosher. That was confirmed in spades when, after a practice session on a hot day, she insisted that we go to the pool to cool off. The bikini she almost had on left nothing to the imagination. Fortunately, there were no children around. Her body would make any hetero male salivate. There were a number of tinted swim trunks there. It was then that I finally determined that I needed to be proactive to find out what the hell was going on. I tried to confront Misty about why she dropped me for Roger, but she was strangely hard to get to. It wasn't until after the third round of the tournament that I cornered her. Alicia and I had beaten her and Roger 6-2, 6-1, and she was scurrying out of the club shortly afterward. I was onto her, however, and rather than showering after the match or joining Alicia for lunch, which she begged me to go to, I caught Misty in the parking lot. I was sitting on the fender of Misty's BMW 8 Series convertible when she tried to sneak away. She sighed when she saw me and her shoulders drooped. She was not smiling when I approached. Misty is in remarkable shape for a 38-year-old. Her face isn't beautiful, but it is extremely interesting and refined. She is as smart as anyone I've ever met, and she always dresses classy. Her tennis outfits are the most elegant at the club and intentionally are not really show off her perfect body. She and I had known each other for 5 years before that day and had been mixed doubles partners in 6 previous tournaments, including 2 at other clubs. "Okay, Misty, what gives?" I sternly asked as I rose to my full height of 6 feet 3 inches and peered down at her 5'6" frame. What do you mean, Lance?" she stuttered. That told me something right there. Misty is as articulate as any woman I've ever met, so if she was stuttering, she was nervous. "What I mean is the bogus reason for not partnering with me, pushing Alicia on me, and then partnering with the club jerk. It doesn't make sense." "We've always had a good relationship," I said with my arms crossed. Alicia asked me to do it," she almost begged. "She said that she wanted to win the tournament and that her best chance was with you," Misty responded, again with the stuttering. "Ridiculous," I responded, still with my arms crossed. "You could just have told her to forget it. You didn't have to go along." Misty furtively looked in all directions and then mumbled, "Get in my car." I got in the passenger side, she the driver's side, and then with another surreptitious look around peeled out of the parking lot. Without either of us talking, she drove a couple of miles, and then into the parking lot of a community recreation center, and parked in the shade. Obviously nervous, she turned to me and said, "My husband Harris didn't like it that my partner was a good-looking younger guy. He thought that we might have something going on, so he pressured me to get another partner. While Misty was certainly someone that I would love to sleep with if we weren't both married, we had never even had a flirtatious relationship with each other the last 5 years, let alone a sparks flying one." I stared at her for a good minute. She couldn't hold eye contact. "So ridiculous," I said. Surprisingly, she started quietly sobbing. I always considered her a tough cookie, so actually her tears were more than surprising. I softly held her shoulders until she looked at me, then put one hand on her chin to gently preclude her from looking away. Okay, Misty, I know that there is something big. Let me tell you first that I am the person you know who is best able to keep a secret. If you tell me the truth, I guarantee that no one will ever find out your secret from me, and I'll do everything in my power to help you out. Trust me. She lightly sobbed a little more, then wiped the tears from her face and sighed. Do you promise not to judge me? I promise, I responded. Do you promise to still stay my friend? I'll be the most loyal friend you've ever had, I retorted. After another deep sigh, she said, I don't know how Alicia found out, but I have something in my past that threatens my license to practice law. I'll leave it at that. It would really be bad for me at work if my law firm found out. And it would also be bad for my marriage, which seems to be on life support right now due to some things I've recently found out about Harris. That statement surprised me, but I tried not to show it as she continued. Please let me leave it at that. I didn't like where this was going, but I saw no reason to cause Misty any more angst, so I said, sure, I don't need details. Misty continued, Alicia promised not to tell anyone if I dropped out as your doubles partner, and put her forward as the alternative. Now I was really confused. After staring into space for a full minute, my brain started working again, and I asked, so she is blackmailing you? Why would she do that? I really don't know, Misty replied, but for some reason, she seems to have a thing for you. I don't understand that, I replied. She could bet almost any guy that she wanted to. Why me? I don't know, Misty said. Some people just have a thing for other people that isn't rationally explainable. I mean, you're certainly a great and good-looking guy, but... I finished the sentence for her, but I'm not in her class as far as looks are concerned. Nobody I know of is, Misty sighed. Thanks, Misty. I smiled, giving her a kiss on her forehead. Your secret is safe with me, and if there's something I can do to help you, let me know. I'm not just saying that, I really mean it. Thanks, Lance, she said with her first smile of the day. Can I drop you back off at the club? Just give me a couple of 100 yards away from the entrance, and I'll walk the rest of the way. I smiled in return. She did drop me off. Thanks again, I said, giving her another kiss on her forehead. My father's philosophy has always been if you have money, you should use it to solve problems, whether they be society's or your own. I rarely looked at things that way, but this was the appropriate time to adopt that attitude. So it came to be that I hired a large private detective firm to do a deep dive on Alicia Spears, while the prestigious PI firm that I had hired was doing their deep dive, which included following Alicia for a week and monitoring all of her devices. Although not yet outside the bounds of the law, I maintained my relationship with her. That primarily meant that we played tennis about every third day and tournament games both weekend days. She was getting very touchy-feely, and if I wasn't suspicious, I could not have resisted her. Did I mention that she was the sexiest woman possible, at least for my tastes? Since Alicia was a great distraction for the male members of the teams we competed against in mixed doubles, she was a valuable team member way above her tennis acumen. We had won all 7 of our matches by the time that I received the PI firm's report. The firm's top female operative, Constance Frago, accompanied by Sam Curtin, one of their IT guys, gave me the report. I have a series of photos showing Alicia Spears' activities over the last week. Constance started out, laying out about 24 photos on the conference room table at my office. Maybe you recognize some of the people she met with. One woman, who we haven't been able to identify, she met with 3 times, Constance continued, pointing to several photos on the top row of prints. And some anonymous guy also 3 times, including once with a woman included, she continued, pointing to photos on the bottom row. Things started to come into focus when I looked carefully at those photos. The woman in question was none other than my darling wife, JC, in a poor disguise. The man was John Davis, my employee in charge of our IT equipment at Biggs Alternatives LLC with no disguise. There were now a wide variety of ways to handle this. Number one was for me to aggressively confront all involved. I don't need to go into the other ways, since I'm a take charge in your face dude. The only question was who to confront first. I considered John the weak link, so he was first on the agenda. The rest of the PI firm's report was also revealing. They heard just enough of some conversations, and saw enough documents, so that they had a good fix that confirmed what I was now expecting, which was also confirmed by what they could find out about Alicia's past history. I authorized their IT guy Sam to bug JC's phone. I paid the bills for it, and I also asked either he or an expert that he recommended do an evaluation of my company's entire IT system. When Andy, the expert that Sam recommended, showed up the next morning at my office, I introduced him to John and told John that he was the representative of a customer who we would be doing lots of business with, so he should take the entire morning to bring him up to date on all of our systems. John looked a little piqued, but I didn't care. He would be way more than piqued before the day was over. After lunch I met with Andy, and he told me that he and one associate of his, with the help of our most experienced IT employee besides John, could do a complete analysis of our system within 48 hours. I wrote him a check and told him to go for it. Once Andy left my office, I called John in. He still looked a little upset with the task I had assigned him that morning, so I decided to hit him between the eyes. After I made a production of locking the door so that he could not open it and escape, I started in. First of all, John, give me your office keys, key cards, office cell phone, and all other firm materials, I said, holding out my hand. He started to protest, but my look shut him up, and he complied. Second, Andy, the guy you took around today is an IT expert who I've hired to completely inspect and overhaul our system. You will not come to work for any reason while he and his associate are doing that, understood? John sheepishly nodded his head. Third, John, in the next hour I'm going to find out what the hell is going on with you. How you handle yourself the next hour will likely determine whether you still have a job here, whether you will be blackballed in the state, whether you will go to jail, whether your marriage will fail, and or whether I will kick the life out of you. John's pique deserted him quickly, and was replaced by a forlorn look and a sweaty brow. I tossed a first photo of him and Alicia at him. How the hell do you know this woman? Well, he started stammering before an idea seemed to click in his head, and he said, I just ran into her at a restaurant last week. I really don't know her except that her name is Alicia. Wrong? I yelled and cuffed him on the back of his head. Not too hard, but not gentle either. Then I tossed the second photo onto his lap. This is from a different day last week, and I have more, I said with a diabolical grin, holding several other photos in my hand that he couldn't see. Now start telling the truth. John almost started to cry, and then did when I tossed the photo of him, JC, and Alicia together. Then he more or less blubbered out what probably was the truth. He prefaced it with, I couldn't help it, Lance. Alicia is so hot, I just couldn't resist her. After I slept with her once, she had me by the gonads and threatened to show my wife the photos of us, which would ruin my entire family's life. I have 2 little kids, you know. He got out before he started blubbering some more. I just stood over him with my arms crossed and my digital tape recorder going as he continued his story over the next 45 minutes or so. The bottom line was that Alicia had been hired by JC and John was tasked with finding out all of the financial information Biggs Alternatives LLC had and putting in a bug that if activated could cede control to anyone with the proper password. Since most of my personal financial files were also in the system, John was also tasked with finding a way to access them so that they could also be taken over. So most of my financial holdings would be at risk. You were going to betray me for one stay with Alicia and the blackmail threat, I snapped when he was finished talking. No. Well, we did it a few more times. She's a goddess, to give me a carrot in addition to a stick, and she and JC convinced me that you were doing illegal things and that I might even eventually get a monetary reward for helping them. I grabbed John by the throat, then got my nose within an inch of his and said, "You're suspended for a week. Get the hell out and don't come back. You are to tell no one about our conversation. If either JC or Alicia contact you, fake illness and even go to a private hospital and check yourself in if you have to, but do not meet with them and do not discuss anything with them. Got it?" He nodded in agreement. I released him, and as I opened the door I said, "I'll still pay you for the next week. What happens after that to be determined. Now remember what I said and get the hell out." I snarled. I pushed him, causing him to crash into the hallway wall as he exited. After the situation with John, I was rather proud of how I kept my composure over the next 48 hours while Andy analyzed our IT system. I played another tennis match with Alicia, which we won, and even had some casual time with her afterward, remaining as pleasant as possible during my time with JC. Once Andy reported what had been done to my company's computer system and the access attempts on my personal financial data, I immediately hired his associate for 2 weeks to fix the damage and secure everything. It was clear I had to confront Alicia. On Sunday afternoon, I finally gave Alicia the attention she'd been seeking. I suggested we take a drive to my cabin in the woods, about 45 minutes from the tennis club. She was upbeat during the trip, occasionally resting her hand on my thigh. But as soon as we stepped into the cabin, I calmly secured her wrists above her head to a chin-up bar I used for exercise. Her demeanor shifted instantly. She tried to play it off, saying, "I didn't realize you were into this kind of stuff," but I could tell she was uneasy. "I'm not into anything like that," I said coldly. "I'm just angry. Tell me exactly what JC hired you to do." Alicia was either a great actress or had no conscience because her response sounded as sincere as possible. "JC didn't hire me for anything. I barely know her." "Really? Then why did you meet her 3 times last week?" I asked, showing her photos from all 3 encounters. We just bumped into each other," she said, her confidence starting to waver. "Why did one of those meetings include John, my former IT guy?" I pressed, holding up a photo of the 3 of them. "I was just introduced to him. He left right after. I don't know anything about him." "You didn't learn anything about him even when you were involved with him, then blackmailed him?" I asked, fainting shock. Her facade began to crumble. I didn't. You're not leaving here until you tell me the truth. I'll give you some time to think. When I come back, you better start talking." She began to panic, but I left the room, giving her the hour I promised. When I returned, she was in tears. "I'll tell you everything," she sobbed. Alicia confessed, and then I recorded the whole thing. Just as I suspected, JC had hired her to seduce both me and John in an effort to get the upper hand in a divorce, making sure I couldn't hide any assets and threatening to sabotage my financial systems if I didn't cooperate. Even though I expected this, it hit hard. I thought JC truly loved me. When I asked Alicia why she did it, all she could offer was one word: greed. As I released Alicia, I said, "You do know that you could be prosecuted for blackmail and a conspiracy to commit fraud, don't you?" She lethargically nodded her head. "How much has JC paid you?" $50,000 so far," she sighed. I wondered how JC had been able to hide that expenditure from me. "Anyway," I continued, "how much more does she owe you?" $10,000 plus if she is successful, $100,000. "Well, she's not going to be successful. We'll go to my office now. You'll detail all of the payments JC made to you in an affidavit. I'll give you a check for the other $10,000, and you'll leave town. Got it?" "I have to close out my apartment," she started to say when I interrupted. "Get what you need for a week to take with you. Give me an address of where to send your stuff, and I'll have it shipped to you." She was surprised by that. After we took care of the affidavit and checked at my office, I drove her to her apartment. As she was getting out of my car, she smiled and said, "Now that things are concluded, would you like to do it one last time?" I stared at her like she had three heads. Her smile turned into a frown before I said, "No thanks, and make sure that you don't do anything that will cause me to report you to the police." She got out and sashayed away. Immediately after dropping Alicia off, I went home. JC was pulling in at the same time. With a perplexed look on her face, she said, "I thought that you would be gone until late tonight." "You thought wrong," I snarled. "What's with the attitude?" She started to say before I cut her off. "Your co-conspirators, John and Alicia, have given you up. Get what you need for a week and get the hell out. I'll have you served tomorrow or Tuesday." I snarled with my nose an inch from hers. After initial shock, she seemed like she was steeling herself and squeaked out, "I live here too, you can't." "Yes, I can. The trust that I am the sole trustee of owns this house, as you acknowledged when you signed the prenup, and we moved in. I'm kicking you out. You have 1 hour, and then I'm calling the cops." I snapped. JC was gone from my house and my life within 59 minutes. She was served Tuesday, and the terms of the divorce set forth in the prenup were included in the divorce papers. I would have let things proceed like that without further recriminations for her, except that she did something vile. Alicia and I forfeited the last 2 games of the tournament, but since we were 8-0 before then, we still came in second. BFD. After the tournament was over one Saturday morning, I saw Misty walking out of the clubhouse carrying a duffel bag and her 4 tennis rackets with a hangdog look on her face. I stopped her. "What's going on, Misty?" There was a tear in her eye when she said, "JC apparently thought that since you and I were friends, she could hurt you by revealing my secret, even though I did what Alicia said. I've been fired and can't afford the next 6 months' dues, especially since Harris and I are splitting up because of some criminal things that he did, and my life is in turmoil now." I was livid. Misty could see the steam coming out of my ears. "Are you all right, Lance?" she asked with real concern in her voice. "Bring your stuff back to your locker, Misty, and then come with me to the office." But she started to say. "No but" involved. "Do as I say," I continued, and then gently grabbed her arm and led her back into the clubhouse. She made a few more words of protest, but she could tell by the look in my eye that resistance was futile. I waited for her outside the women's locker room while she returned her stug, took her by the hand, and marched with her to the office. Although not normally and on the weekends, the club supervisor, Nancy Gregg, was there. "Hi, Nancy," I said, shaking her hand. "There seems to be some sort of a mix-up with Misty's account. For now, charge her next 6 months' dues to my credit card, and within the next few weeks we'll sort it out," I said, handing her my credit card. "There's a mixed doubles tournament at Club Westover next month, and I need my old partner back." I smiled by way of explanation. Nancy called her assistant over, who handled the transaction. I could see that Misty still wanted to protest, but didn't want to at the same time. I walked Misty to her car, where she thanked me, and then buried her head in my chest and quietly cried for a couple of minutes while I stroked her head. When she regained her composure, I opened the door for her. "Can we practice tomorrow?" I asked. "Would 11 a.m. be okay?" she inquired. "I'll sign up now. One more thing. I really meant it when we last talked and I said that I'd do anything to help you. Those are not just words, they're a promise." She smiled and then swung her bubble but into the driver's seat. Not that I was focusing on that. We had a great practice session the next day and then had a pleasant lunch with 3 other club members. Monday I was on the warpath. I demanded a meeting with JC, the first time that I'd see her since I booted her out, at my attorney's office. When she got there on Wednesday, I presented her and her attorney with all of the basic information I had about her conspiracy with John and Alicia. This isn't criminal behavior, her attorney harangued after reviewing it. Maybe the DA's office will agree with you, I shot back, but we will find out, and in any event I'll sue your client in civil court and will take no prisoners. JC looked shaken. What do you want? She meekly asked. Well, since you had to be vindictive and got Misty Granger fired, I want the property settlement that we previously agreed to revise so that your monetary compensation is cut in half, I grinned. Now see here, JC's attorney started to say before I cut him off. You have 2 days to decide. Then I go to the DA's office and file a civil suit. I think that with John's testimony alone, he has to stay in my good graces if he ever wants another job in his field in this area. I will prevail. Then I got up and walked out. By Friday she had agreed to my proposal. As the divorce proceeded, now smoothly, it was only a matter of time since all issues had been worked out. I was still bummed about why JC had done what she had. I never could bring myself to ask her though, since I loathed being in her presence. Then something else came up that took my mind off that issue. Misty called me at night about a week after my meeting with JC. After some small talk, she asked, "Did you really mean it that you'd help me out?" "I never meant anything more in my life," I chuckled. "Can I come over in 10 or 15 minutes?" "I'll leave the light on for you," I replied. Misty did show up about 15 minutes later. I gave her a hug and offered her a drink. She accepted, and we sat at my kitchen table. I'm so embarrassed, Lance. During my divorce proceedings, I found out that Harris lied about our finances the entire last 2 years. In addition to some criminal acts, he's gambled all our money away. He's taken off for parts unknown, which at least will facilitate the divorce, but the bank is about to repossess my house. I know that you've got at least 3 guest rooms. Could I live in one of them until I get a job and get back on my feet? I had to suppress the lascivious thoughts that flashed through my brain when she asked that. I had always liked Misty, and thought that she was cute and, well, she did have that great body, but I never considered her mate material before. Now everything in my life was different. I didn't think that it was fair to her for me to look at her like that when she was going through hard times, and I didn't want to take advantage of her, but I also could not refuse her desperate request. As I responded, I vowed to keep my lascivious thoughts in check. "Sure, Misty, I told you that I'd help you and I will. When do you want to move in?" "Well, I'm having a yard sale this weekend, and the bank wants me to turn over things to them next week. Would next Monday be okay?" "Sure," I said, smiling and squeezing her hand. "Also, I'm selling my expensive BMW convertible and getting a cheaper and more practical car. Do you have any suggestions?" We had a pleasant conversation for the next hour. We hugged goodbye, which again caused me to have to suppress my lascivious thoughts. That weekend, I helped Misty with her yard sale on Saturday, and we played in the first round in a tournament at Club Westover on Sunday morning and won. Sunday afternoon, I went with her to sell her BMW and get a basic Honda, which netted her about $10,000, enough to pay off some other debts, after she paid off her car loan. Monday, I had everything that she didn't sell but wanted to keep put into a small storage unit, and Wednesday she moved into one of the guest rooms. Saturday night, we went out to celebrate our new living arrangement. It was nice to have someone else living with me, since I didn't like living alone. Our nice living arrangement changed drastically when we got home just before midnight. I had never really seen Misty drink much before, but she did that night. Apparently more than her 120-pound body could properly assimilate, because although she wasn't really drunk, she was feeling no pain. After we made some coffee, we sat in the living room to chat. After about 5 minutes, she drained her cup and then came and sat on my lap. As she stared into my soul in much as my eyes, she mumbled, "You know that I'd be helpless if you wanted to take advantage of me. There's no way that little old me could fight a big brute like you off. I just have to take it. I'm completely at your mercy."